our society is geared toward looking to the external world for solutions. We've lost our connection to the natural healing properties of our own unique beingness. This Spacecast, centered around the work of Dr. Rhonda Rogers, is dedicated to restoring this lost connection through turning the spotlight back onto ourselves and the healing that can occur when we create space to listen to the internal wisdom of our own body-mind. Hi, Suzanne.
Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Everyone, this is Suzanne Gagne, and a dear friend and a fellow hiker. And about 6 months ago, I was on a hike with Suzanne in the Angeles National Forest. It was a beautiful day, and I was a couple of hikers back from Suzanne, and I overheard a compelling story that she was telling me, or a little bit of it, about some challenges that she had been through with her health. And not just minor challenges, major challenges, to the point where she wasn't sure if she was going to survive. And I immediately thought, wow, what an amazing feat, because here this vibrant woman in front of me was doing, I think we were doing a 14-mile hike that day.
Yeah, we were.
And so I really wanted to hear Suzanne's story of how she went from literally not knowing if she was going to live through the night to hiking a 14-mile day. And so that's why I invited Suzanne here today to tell her story. And if we could kind of give some context for how this all began, when did you first notice that there were some changes in your health status?
So it actually goes back to childhood. I had symptoms. So I have lupus, systemic lupus. And I remember being in 4th grade, I believe, and having severe pneumonia, which is just not normal for someone, a young child to have that. So that was odd. I had a very hard time fighting off infections, and I was sick all the time, chronically ill, chronically on antibiotics. But no one knew what it was, or even thought it was anything, really, other than I was just kind of a sickly child. And then I remember being in high school and I played soccer, and it was hard, and we were in the sun, which is a trigger of lupus. And I started feeling like I had the flu, and I would get these achy flu-like symptoms. And again, the doctor said, oh, I think it's just allergies, like hay fever or something like that. And so it kept going like that, where there would be like these little, I would do something that would aggravate it. But it was just dismissed, and then it wasn't until it became undeniable that something was critically wrong with me when I was 27 years old. I started to get these excruciating swelling in my fingers. And they put me, I tried to get a doctor's appointment. I couldn't get a doctor's appointment. I finally got one. The doctor said, oh, you have hypothyroidism, and that could maybe contribute to this. That might be part of the problem. So I think that's what's wrong with you. And they gave me medication for that. And it was true that I did have that. But it wasn't all I had. And it just kept getting worse. And then I ended up having fevers. I started to run a fever of 102. And so I had to stay home from work, and then it wouldn't go away. And no matter what I did, and I went into the clinic to see the doctor, and they just kept giving me antibiotics. They thought I had an infection. I just kept losing weight. My hair was falling out. I got down to 93 pounds.
And what age were you at this time?
27.
Still 27. Okay.
Yes, this was in June of 2001.
Okay.
And I couldn't work. So every day I kept thinking tomorrow will be better. And so I would wait. And then the next day I call the office and say, I still can't come in. I'm still running this fever of 102 and I can't eat and I can't do anything. And it literally, that fever went on for like 22 days.
Wow. And just to interject, 102 is not a safe fever. That is when, in my training and my understanding, 102 is an indication that something is very wrong and that hospitalization is necessary to bring down the fever.
Yes, and they weren't doing anything. I would call. It was just a mess. They wouldn't help me. And no matter what I did to call in and say, I need help, they just kept ignoring me and giving me antibiotics and sending me home. So one night around 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up, and this fever was still happening and I was still absolutely miserable. And I just thought to myself, you need to find somebody else. You need to call your health insurance tomorrow and do something, or else I think you're going to die. I mean, meaning myself.
Yes.
And so in the morning I called and they didn't want to do anything either. And they said, oh, you got to wait till the first of the month. And I said, listen, this is what I think is happening. I don't know what it is, but it is really serious. And it might even be sepsis or something,
right.
And I started using words like that.
Right.
And I said, I want you to put it in writing that I have told you all of this and you still refuse to switch me to a new doctor who will actually help me and that I'm probably going to die.
How terrifying.
And you need to put it in. I'm putting it in writing and I need you to sign it saying that I told you all this and you don't care,
right.
And so immediately they said, where would you like to go?
Wow.
So I got a new doctor.
Well, hold on.
Mm-hmm.
How wonderful. Well, how tragic that you had to go to such extremes of, advocating for yourself under the fear that you might not live through the night. And that's what was required in order to get a response from a medical professional. That's very distressing.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Please continue.
So the next day I went to see this doctor. Can I say his name?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
His name is Dr. Joel Doughton. And he was a geriatric specialist actually, but he was incredible. Even though that was his specialty, he still was able to help me. He did some blood work and then told me to just go home and then he was going to call me. He called me within 24 hours and said, how fast can you be in ER? There's a bed waiting for you.
Wow.
And he made all of that happen.
Amazing. You finally found someone willing to investigate what was happening.
Yes.
Amazing.
So they still weren't sure and they thought it may have been sepsis or an infectious disease or something. So at the time, one of the hospitals in town was closed down and there was only one open. And so everybody was like triple and quadruple beds in rooms. And because they didn't know what was wrong with me, I got my own room. So that was kind of, nice.
A tragic twist of fate.
Yes. And so, they did some more work and then they came in and I was in agony. Like it was an agony that's hard to describe, like just shooting pains and pressure and feels like all your cells in your body are going to explode. Like true agony.
Can you elaborate a little bit about what it would feel like in certain areas of your body, like extremities versus pressure in the head or in the torso? What was it exactly like that you were experiencing?
Well, it was whole body for sure. It's just a massive quantity of inflammation. So it's hard to describe, but kind of like the worst flu you've ever had where you're so feverish and inflamed.
Got it.
And everything hurts and everything, all the muscles and tendons and everything are just kind of on fire.
Right.
And then there are these shooting pains that they were shooting down my wrists and down my hands and in my elbows and knees and in my back and sciatica. Because it's all inflammation caused,
Right.
So just and then pressure because everything was swollen and my hands looked like marshmallows.
Right.
So the tissues are like expanding and it's all that pressure pushing too.
Right. So your lymphatic system is overwhelmed right now.
Completely.
Yes. Right.
Yeah. And no food. I couldn't eat at all.
Right.
I mean, I would try to eat something and then like a popsicle and then just double over in a crumpled pain.
Right.
You know?
So you mentioned that you'd lost a lot of weight. What was before you were experiencing this extreme reaction, what was your weight?
120.
And what was your weight when you were eventually hospitalized?
93 pounds.
93. Got it.
Yeah. And I'm 5'4".
Right.
So, it was just, and they said that my skull, like I don't know what it's called, but they said they could tell it was like what happens to people when they have anorexia, where you start to eat away your muscles
right
around your face and
right.
stuff, and that was happening. There's a word for it, I don't remember.
Okay.
So, they came in around midnight, and they gave me something. They put some medication into this bag in my IV, and within probably 20-30 minutes, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like that. It was all gone like it never happened. It was like my entire body went back to normal and I was no longer having any symptoms or any pain.
Fascinating.
And the doctor came in, Dr. Babajanians, who was another incredible doctor, a rheumatologist, and he said, well, it's lupus because we just gave you 60 milligrams of prednisone, glucosteroid in your IV, and the disease is gone.
Wow.
So that's how we know.
Right. Right. Fascinating.
So I wasn't sure what to think because I didn't really know what lupus was. And I just remember thinking I was relieved that I now had a true reason. What was happening to me had a name, and it couldn't be dismissed anymore, and it wasn't all in my head like many people had told me.
Wow. Okay, let's pause right there. Are we talking about healthcare providers that told you it was in your head?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. In absence of the overwhelming symptoms that you were having, like 102 fever for days on end, even during that period, people were telling you that it was a kind of a psychosomatic challenge, or was that before?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah, that would have been before. Once it got to that extreme, that June of 2001, but I was still being dismissed, though. I was being given antibiotics and sent home,
right?
Repeatedly in 21 or 22 days. I can't remember which it was. But in that time, I went to the doctor 4 times and continually was not helped and was sent back home with just a bottle of antibiotics.
Got it. Yeah. So now you have a diagnosis. The prednisone was helping you. It seems like you've come into contact with appropriate level of care. Then what happened?
So I was in the hospital for a couple more days. And I felt exhausted, but no more pain. They sent me home after a few days. And I remember I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in the hospital because I was so scared at that point. Scared of getting worse again. Scared of germs. Just really, really afraid and facing mortality and extremely scared. And I remember just not wanting to leave the hospital. And I went home and I bought books about lupus, and that may not have been a good idea because they were awful and scary. And they said way more things of all the things that were going to go wrong with me and how I was going to end up, in a wheelchair and, dialysis and just, completely falling apart, and it was just going to be a nightmare from this point forward.
Got it. So not a very hopeful picture painted by these. Were these books for medical professionals or lay people, or
they were for lay people? Yeah, and it was just saying, these are all the things, and this is what the prednisone's going to do to you, and it was just so awful.
As if you hadn't been through enough already.
Exactly. Exactly. So that was not good. Then I got even more scared, and I started having panic attacks from the fear.
Well, understandably so. I mean, you've just been through a really challenging medical ordeal, and now your kind of psychic energy is being zapped by books that are, giving you a death sentence, basically, right?
Torturous death
Yes.
sentence.
Yes. Wow.
Yeah. So, it was a terrible time, and then my hair, my hair just kept falling out daily, just tons of hair until it was almost bald, and it was just this little furry bit of hair on top. That was hard, but I was eating again, so that was good from but the prednisone had its own challenges. It's makes you really, really hyper, gives you insomnia. All of these things were happening from the steroids.
Right.
And I was trying to learn to manage that and deal with that. And, they tried giving me some sleeping medication to deal with the insomnia from the prednisone. And I remember just having like full on auditory, visual, and what's the other thing?
Mental.
Yeah, like hallucinations.
Yeah.
From that. And I said, okay, I'm not doing this. Isn't working. So it was just a real battle. That time was hard. It was a lot of figuring things out, what's going to work, what's not, a lot of trial and error. And it was a really difficult time.
Right. And so you are now attempting to manage not only the lupus, but the kind of mental anguish of dealing with this, per the lay literature that you're reading, debilitating, agonizing disease. And now extra medication is being added to the mix that has its own side effects, which in your case do not seem favorable. It sounds like the medication that you're on is actually adding to kind of your mental health challenges on top of the physical health challenges.
Yes.
So now what do we do?
Yeah. So, and they'd also given me, because of the anxiety, they gave me Ativan, and instead of telling me I should go see a therapist to get some help. Luckily, I didn't want to stay on Ativan forever. So I kind of on my own said, I this has been a traumatic experience. And also grief. I was grieving the loss of myself, the person I thought I was. And then there was now this new person that I didn't like very much.
Wow. And can we pause there for a second? You just introduced the word trauma, which I appreciate your bravery in bringing that up, because it is traumatic to receive a diagnosis that is, in the case of the literature that you read, kind of like a slow, deteriorating, agonizing, death sentence. And then having side effects from the medication that you're on and not receiving the support that you'd hoped for, from the get-go. So I very much appreciate the word trauma, because all of these different scenarios were kind of having a stacking effect in your case that was adding even more mental challenge on top of an already difficult medical diagnosis. So, and I also appreciate the fact that you said talk therapy was never on the table. It wasn't one of the options. It was all medication, all pharmaceutical. So, which, as you've described, has its own set of side effects and challenges that may not be actually helping. So please continue.
So, yeah, so I did find a therapist on my own and went to her for a couple of years to try to grieve the loss of the life I had before and try to find a way to work with this new life. And so that was very, very helpful. And I was able to stop the anxiety medication and just use, the talk therapy, which was helpful. But I had managed medications, very common lupus medications. It was just the prednisone, and Plaquenil is another very common lupus medication. And, sometimes the dose would go up, sometimes the dose would go down. It just depended on how I was feeling. And I saw my doctor every, 6 to 8 weeks with blood work, so we could just kind of keep the disease in check. And that worked for a while. I had to stay out of the sun completely. The sun was, there's, an absolute enemy to people with lupus. That was very, very hard because I've always been nature is where I, fill my soul. Mm-hmm. And that was devastating to me to not be able to be outside. I had to work around the sun and make sure I did it really, really early in the morning or really, really late in the evening. Mm-hmm. And that, that was difficult. Too much exercise, would cause a flare up. I had to be very careful. Everything in very, very moderation, tons of sleep, and just being extremely careful about everything, right, and missing out on a lot.
Right. Big lifestyle change for someone like you.
Yes, it was. And that was very hard. But, it kind of was okay. I was able to make it work. And then the disease just kept getting worse. And then the medication wasn't enough. And then I had a massive flare up. And I can't remember what year it was, but it was several years later. Same thing where the hands were in so much pain, the shooting pains on my hands, they were swollen. I couldn't stop sleeping. You get really, really tired. It's like someone pulled your plug out.
Right.
I was going through all that. And then that doctor's like, oh, well, we need to add another one. So we have to add CellCept to the mix here. We have to do this. And the solution was always, let's add more medication. So as time went on, and let's add more. Oh, not enough. You're going to take 5 of those now pills a day instead of 4. Let's try that. And it was that was always the solution. Let's just add more.
Right.
And then, of course, like you had said earlier, then the more side effects of the medications. And then I remember, just so many things were going wrong with my body. It was just falling apart, but it seemed okay on the outside. Like people didn't really know what was going on. They were like, you look great. But it's on everything. All these things were just happening on the inside.
Well, and I'm certain there was some image management on your part, trying to, maybe for your own benefit, keeping a positive outlook, but also perhaps presenting a facade to those around you, because that's what we do in society. We don't want people to know when we have a challenge, right? Yeah, for sure. And it got to the point where I had multiple specialists. I had a pulmonologist because they had to monitor me for lung collapse disorder. I had skin, dermatologist. I had a cardiologist because I had pericarditis. I had so many specialists, I can't even remember. I think I had 8 or 9 specialists. And with every few weeks, I was going to see somebody who was going to poke and prod and, me for more testing. And then that was just all that happened, that over and over and over again, right. Just more of that. And then just piling on the meds. Right. Now, the pericarditis, was that a side effect of a medication or the progression of the lupus?
Lupus.
I gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Just the inflammation around the lining of the heart.
Got it. So literally lupus is little by little impacting more organs and more of your kind of metabolic functioning as the disease is progressing.
Definitely.
Got it.
Yes. So it was pretty much in every major organ system in my body. And I had a specialist for each of those organ systems. So, and then finally, even they had given me so much CellCept that I would have these fits of vomiting where it was so toxic that every couple of weeks I would reach some sort of buildup, I guess, of toxicity. And I would just start throwing up, kind of like somebody who's on chemo.
Right.
And so they had to back off on that a little bit. So then the next answer was, well, we're going to try intravenous, and you're going to need chemo or something like that. Mm. And that was where we were with the medical side.
Now, if you have some awareness of chemotherapy, that is a destructive type of therapy that actually targets specific cells, right, to kill them. I'm not sure how that fits in with lupus. Is there a reason they would target specific cells?
I honestly am not sure, other than the fact that they said that they needed to shut the immune system down. The whole point was to shut the immune system down. So whatever they were going to do, and I honestly don't know specifically, but the goal was shut down the immune system.
Fascinating, which is what's theoretically keeping us alive, right? The immune system.
Yes.
I'm perplexed.
Yes, I was too. But it was they said that, because your body is attacking yourself. Your immune system is attacking your organs and thinks that your organs are germs.
Yes.
And thinks it's just attacking you instead of germs. And we've got to stop your immune system. We don't know what else to do.
Well, at least there's some logic in that statement. However, how sustainable is that? How do we live without an immune system?
Exactly.
Got it.
So serendipitously, at this point, after I had got that news, I had been tutoring my friend's daughter, and they had been watching me. So, Cornelia Odell and Toby Odell, that's the parents of Anna, and I had been tutoring Anna, and Cornelia's a doctor, and so she had been watching and I had been in their house every Thursday, and so she was just looking at me and thinking, gosh, she's really sick, and something's really wrong. So, and Toby's is the kind of person that's always looking for answers and always trying to figure stuff out about health. And, he had been trying something called Forksoverknives for his own health. And
so let's interject.
Oh, sure.
Forksoverknives, very influential book that kind of challenges the notion that a meat dairy-based diet is the way to health. It's actually the antithesis of that. It's about whole foods, non-processed foods, and also a largely plant-based diet. Yes. So please continue.
Yes. So he was, he was on their website, and he somehow on their website, he found a link to a doctor who wrote a book, and she had lupus, and she had it really aggressively like I did. And she wrote a book called Goodbye Lupus. And he said, there's this book. And she said she did this protocol and she reversed her disease, and she doesn't take any medication anymore.
Wow. Wow.
And I was at a point where I had no hope. I had no hope. And honestly, it was so bad. It wasn't living.
Yeah.
And I was at a point where I was ready to die.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in living like that. The suffering was so great that it just seemed like it was time. Like if there was no hope and no answer and no way out of this, please. I mean, I wasn't suicidal. I would not do that. That was never across my mind. But what I was wishing, like, let's just get this over with.
Right. And how old were you at this time?
30. I believe I was 32.
32.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very sad.
So this book, I was skeptical because nothing worked. All those years of struggle since 2001.
Right.
And this was about 15 years later of 15 years of struggle and torture. And obviously I was skeptical, but I ordered it and came in a couple, the next day, and I read the book, and it was very simple. And she just said, you can't eat anything processed, and you have to eat plant-based and no chemicals, and everything has to be just natural foods. And just, raw, like a lot of raw. It doesn't have to be all raw, but a lot of raw things, right, full of nutrients.
And is there a direct kind of metabolic relationship between say, inflammation and processed foods?
Yes.
Okay. So it is very simple. It's kind of getting at the mechanism for the inflammation.
Yes.
Yes.
And so this is a type of living and diet that would be wonderful for everyone. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was, life or death.
Life or death. Yes.
Yeah. So was it easy? No, it was a nightmare at first. I mean, I wish I could say, I decided immediately that I was going to do it because I had nothing to lose. My choices were chemotherapy and more suffering and misery, or try this very extreme diet. So
or cut out processed foods.
Right.
Yeah. I think I would make the same choice. Yeah.
Exactly. So I said, okay. And one would think that I would have gone out for some lavish last meal, but I didn't comprehend the longevity of it and the eternity of it, really. And so I really didn't do anything special. I went and had a pizza at Blaze, mm-hmm. and it wasn't even, like
that was your last quote unquote real meal.
Yeah.
Right.
So silly. And then I said, okay, this is it. Tomorrow I change. Tomorrow I'm going to do it. And it's a ton of smoothies, like a ton of kale, a ton of dark green, a ton of chia seeds, flax, avocados, all those things that bring down inflammation. And in order to eat all of that, you're eating a lot of smoothies,
right?
To get it all in your system,
right?
Because we don't have all day to graze,
yes.
So I always have my bottle with my smoothies and I'm drinking, mm-hmm. and I was eating real like rice, and some other, veggies and things like that, but it was really minimal. Everything else was cut. I didn't even have beans or anything at the time because they seemed to be bothering me. Anything that would raise, and I'd start to feel like achy and kind of burning on the inside, anything that would make me feel like that, I'd say, nope, cut it.
So you have become a master of listening to your body.
Yes.
And making immediate adjustments out of necessity.
Yes.
Yes.
And I did, my partner, David, he bought me for Valentine's Day a session with the doctor who wrote the book.
Wow. How did that go?
It was amazing. But she just encouraged me. And I asked her, do I really have to give up, sugar, like processed sugar, really? Because it's in everything. And what about citric acid? And, so really, is that really? She said, yes, you can't have any of that stuff.
Right.
You have to really go clean it. Sugar, you can get it from dates. You can get it from maple syrup. There's lots of sugars. You're just unfortunately going to have to cook almost everything for yourself because nobody cooks like this.
Right. Well, and that in itself is tragic, right? Because the research is out there that says highly processed food is the reason that cardiovascular disease is the number one killer.
Yes.
So I love how you have embraced this, but I'm also sad that it took such an extreme circumstance to get you into eating how humans technically should eat, right?
Yes.
So not to make light of how challenging this has been, but it's almost a gift in a strange way, because someone that doesn't have that urgency of needing to clean up their diet is not going to be as fastidious about this, process as you are, and
yes.
continue to be, right?
Yes. Yes. It was one of possibly the hardest thing I ever did, to be totally honest. Right. I wish I could tell you, oh, it's so easy. And, it was so hard. I could not believe, and, maybe you can speak more to this. It felt like addiction. Like I was breaking an addiction, especially dairy and sugar, more than the meat. The meat I craved a little bit, but it was dairy and sugar.
Absolutely. Well, it is, right? It is an addiction. And Dr. Neil Barnard speaks a lot about this. He wrote a book called The Cheese Trap, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's one of those foods that evolutionarily 100,000 years ago, we really needed fat in our diets. And so we still have that genetic makeup that craves that kind of quick, fatty goodness. And yet we can now get it every day of the week in mass quantities, unlike, 100,000 years ago when it was really hard to come by. So, yep, it is an addiction.
So it was, I remember literally like leaning against the wall and like kind of not hard, but like lightly banging my head into the wall. Like, because I was going out of my mind, wanting just one yogurt. Is it really going to matter? Like
withdrawals. Yes.
It was horrible.
Yes.
But eventually it went away, but it took months. It really did take months. Yeah. And then after about 6 months, I was feeling so much better. Actually, after 8 weeks, I went back to the doctor who was prepping me for chemo. After I think it was 6 or 8 weeks, and she had run my blood work, and I went into her office, and she said, "You don't have to do chemo. We're taking it off the table. You don't need to go on chemo."
That's amazing.
She said, "Your numbers are going in the other direction."
8 weeks.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And she said, what exactly is it what are you doing exactly? Because she just was puzzled. She could not believe it, what was happening, how it was reversing. And from that point forward, it just continually reversed. A little bit every single time, a little bit. And then they started weaning me off prednisone, but they told me you'll never probably ever get fully off prednisone because you've taken it for so long that your body is not making it anymore. And it's going to be extremely difficult to reboot your own adrenal glands to make your own, that chemical that prednisone is in your adrenals.
Right.
And you have to have it. Every human makes like 2.5, I think, or 2.6, something like that, milligrams a day. Naturally, it's just part of our life. And you're going to need to you're going to have to take steroids forever because your body probably won't reboot.
Probably.
Yeah. And I said, "Oh no, it will." And so I started shaving the pills. So literally I would take a knife and shave off the tiniest fraction. And then I would take those shaved pills. And so I wasn't going down by like I'm sorry, let me explain this better. At first it's easy. You can drop like from 15 to 10 or from 20 to 15. You can do that, with a doctor's care. But once you get to like 5 and under, it's very difficult to drop because you just feel like you can't wake up. You're in a fog. You can even get weird, like a little weird and dizzy, and you have to be closely monitored by a doctor.
Okay.
You cannot just stop steroids.
And were you under the care of a doctor when you were continuing the weaning process against doctor's advice?
Well, she told me I could try.
Great. Okay. Well, that's supportive.
She said, "You can try, but it doesn't happen." No one does this.
In her experience and training, it doesn't happen.
Right.
And yet you had another doctor who had written a book from her firsthand experience with lupus that said, "Oh yeah, you can do this."
Yes.
Yes.
So, and she said nobody gets off steroids when they've been on it for as long as you have. So that's why I did the shave, like I didn't cut them in half. That would have been too extreme. Right. I would take a 1 milligram pill and cut it into 4 pieces.
Makes sense. So you're getting down to smaller and smaller doses while being very aware of what changes you noticed within your own behavior and your own, let's say, orientation towards what felt right and didn't feel right.
Yes. And so I would, I did 4 3/4 milligrams I went from 5 to 4 3/4. And I did that for, a couple months. And then I did 4 1/2 for a couple months. And then 4 1/4, and so on and so forth. And it took me a couple of years, but I got to 0.
Fascinating.
And it worked. And by the time I got to 0, I was a little weird for a couple of days, a little wonky and like not very hungry, and then also a little bit dizzy, but it lasted for like a couple of days. It wasn't that big a deal. And then I started to feel normal again. But, it took a while. And then after that, I noticed I was tired and a little sluggish for a while, a few months, but nothing serious. And eventually I felt normal. Like I think what's normal again.
Excellent. Well, I am looking at this woman sitting before me who I would not have imagined had ever been through that scare. I mean, you look beautiful. You've got a full head of hair. You've got long blonde hair. You're at a lovely body weight. So that, I think, is a testament. And you've got this big smile on your face. You've got these beautiful, clear eyes and this big smile on your face. So to someone who was not familiar with your history, this would be a complete shock. And I think it's also a testament to your kind of tenacity to not give up. And when you, as you said, I was skeptical, but you were willing to try because you had, as you've explained, you ran out of ideas. It was chemotherapy or giving up processed foods. And wow, I from what I can see, it's working very well. So
Yeah.
Are there still challenges? Are there bad days? Is there any relapse? Do you have to continually monitor, modify? Tell us about what your routine is like now.
Sure. So it's been I've been on this plant-based and gluten-free too. I can't have gluten, but I also can't have gluten-free things because gluten-free things are full of
Super processed.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's plant-based, gluten-free, process-free, just a whole foods diet. And I have been doing this for, I think it's been 6 years now. So, and every time I go to the doctor, it's better. I mean, the numbers are better and better. And then that has allowed me to wean off of almost all the medication.
Wow.
So currently, now I'm taking 1 Cellcept a day. That's it.
That's amazing. And what was the height of that medication? How much were you taking?
Like 40 milligrams of prednisone a day. Actually 60 at one point, but that's not sustainable. So they dropped it to 40, 40 milligrams of prednisone, 6 Cellcept, 2 Plaquenil.
To one medication once per day.
1 pill one day.
That's amazing.
And my goal is to ultimately get off of that too. But,
of course.
But I know that I can't I'm not there yet.
Right.
And because I have tried and I start to feel like I need to get back on it. Like I'm not quite ready to be off of everything.
Right. But you're also constantly monitoring and trying to see if there is a change, if it is a good time to scale back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm always pushing the boundaries a little bit to see how far I can go. And this summer, I was in the sun, and I can be in the sun now, but I spent a lot of time in the sun, and I know it was too much because I could feel that it was starting to kind of a little bit of a change, feel a little bit stiff fingers, you know, and I thought, okay, it's time to not do that.
Right.
You know, that was a little too much heat, too much sun, too much backpacking food.
Yes.
It's time to, go back home, rest, not be in the sun, and, eat like a lot of green things, and then it calms itself back down. And that's, and now I'm fine again. And that's the difference between the past and now. In the past, it would spiral out of control. And now if I start to push a little too hard, push those boundaries a little too much, my body tells me with this kind of, I get tired and stiff fingers and stuff. And then I just back off, and everything falls back in line and goes back to normal.
That's amazing.
So that's what I do. And exercise, I can exercise now. I can exercise hard, I can run and hike and backpack and ruck and all of those things that I love to do, and weightlifting that I never could have done before.
I can support that statement. Was it 2 weeks ago? We did a backpack, and it was like 15 miles and over 5,000 feet of gain over 2 days. So I've seen this lady. She is a beast. She is a beast on the mountain. Yeah. So clearly what you're doing is working for you. And I'm so impressed by your tenacity. And I also appreciate your honesty and you know, how you were losing hope, which I don't think it is outrageous under the circumstances. You know, when your quality of life falls that low and you feel so unsupported, you know, when there are no options. You know, what I hear through your story is before you came into contact with the right information and the right doctors, it was here, just, you know, take some steroids or some antibiotics, you know, maybe even a completely inappropriate medication, and we can't help you.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out. But you did. Through listening and connecting with other people. And so are there any parting words you would like to share with someone who might know someone who's going through this type of challenge or is experiencing this challenge firsthand?
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, what I've learned through my own experience and how I've learned to manage the disease is I think there's several critical things, several critical pieces. So I've kind of talked a lot about food, but it's not just food. So it is the food, obviously. That's number one. That was the first change I made. But then exercise is huge. You have to exercise to help you your body control stress and move the lymphatic system, to move all the gunk out of your system. It's critical. But you would want to, you know, just listen to your body and take it easy. It took me a long time to get to where I'm at, you know, 5,000 feet, 15 miles in 2 days. Like that didn't happen overnight. When I first started, I could barely make it to the end of the block.
Wow.
You know? Mm-hmm. So it's a slow process.
Right.
You got to be patient, but you can get there.
Right.
So exercise, food, sleep, stress control, which it goes with the exercise, but also mental health.
Yes.
And getting help for, you know, getting mental health services to help you deal with the disease, and anything else in your life that is contributing to the disease. Like, you know, if you're bottling up your stress like I did.
Right.
And that's going to make it a lot worse. And there's whole books written about this. Mm-hmm. You know, a life-changing book for me was Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, where he talks about putting the you know, disease coming from the stress that we're keeping like bottled up inside. So mental health, that's huge too. So really it's those things. You can't just do one of those pieces. You have to go deal with all of those pieces. That is huge.
Yeah.
You know, but it works. I mean, I didn't think I was going to be 50. I did not think I would live to be 50. And now I'm almost 50, and I'm going to be I think I'm going to be fine.
I do too. Suzanne, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And we will make a link available to the resources that Suzanne has shared with us today. And I'm so grateful for learning about your challenge and also the recovery and the tenacity and the hope and just seeing someone across from me with such a huge smile on her face. You folks, I can't wipe the smile off of her face as she's telling this story. So thanks for listening. And until next time, this is Dr. Rhonda Rogers on the Inner Space Cast.